What's going on, Packer fans? Welcome back to an all-new episode of the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You know my guests already, but I'm going to introduce them anyway. The one and only Justis Mosqeuda. You can find him on social media at JUMOSQ. Of course, acmepackingcompany.com. Justis, how are you on this wonderful day?
Can't complain. Still got almost a month of summer vacation before news starts flying again. So enjoying it.
Right before this, I was doing a podcast with Dusty Evely, as I'm recording, obviously, some of these in advance. And Justis, I talked to Dusty for like 40 minutes, and I now cannot wait until September 8th or whatever it is, the start of the season. I am ready for football officially. I've got the itch. It's not good now. I'm going to need this thing to fast forward. Obviously, don't want to wish away this part of the year where I have a little bit more time with the family and things like that. But I officially have football fever now, and it's not a great thing to have at the end of June, early July.
It'll be right around the corner, man.
Everything's
going to be a blur. So
it's going to be warp speed before you know it. We've got a lot to get into still. I know it is, again, kind of the quiet period, but I have a lot of things that I want to dig into. You've put out some great articles recently, and also want to just talk some other stuff that's buzzing around the internet. I want to start with this conversation about Matt LaFleur not being a top 10 head coach in the NFL. Of course, as people are listening to this, it's probably going to be a few days since this was a conversation point, but PFF put out a top 10 list of top coaches in the league, I guess, and Matt LaFleur was not on that list of 10. I'll just start there. What were your thoughts on him not being included? Is he a top 10 coach? Is Kevin Stefanski worthy of being number 10? How do you want to go through this?
Yeah, so Rich wrote that up for us at APC, and I thought he did a pretty good job of kind of like breaking down what was going on. I'm a little surprised. I'd probably have him as a top 10 coach. Personally, I'd have to think about how the rankings would go. I know, honestly, so Stefanski at 10, right? People are going to have different opinions about that. I think ultimately he's a good play caller. I think Matt has just done a better job than that. So like that's one name. I do think it's really interesting that Tomlin and Harbaugh, John Harbaugh, were like top 5 guys. I'm like, I'm usually the top like I'm usually like I call him the bomb squad, right? Because like, you know, shit's gonna hit the fan, and he's gonna end up making it all right by the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I'm always really impressed. Just the minefield that Tomlin has navigated through during his time in Pittsburgh and just never had a losing record. With that being said, I don't know, I don't think he's a top 5 head coach right now. So yeah, I'd have some pushback there. I know Sirianni was on there. The Eagles won the Super Bowl.
Yep.
I get it. You have to dish out credit when a team wins. There are a lot of people in that organization I'm willing to give a lot of credit to before Nick Sirianni.
He was this close to getting fired. At least it felt that way. I know a lot of people wanted him fired.
He shaved his head. Do you remember? He did the whole Britney Spears.
I don't want to hear anyone talk about Matt LaFleur being emotional when Nick Sirianni just won a Super Bowl. That dude is one of the most emotional coaches in the NFL.
Oh, yeah.
And it worked. I mean, it worked for him. Again, he won a Super Bowl. So he has, carte blanche to do almost anything he wants at this point. But yeah, that is one emotional coach. And again, Super Bowl winner.
I just okay, so I want to go through a list of coaches. And are they even in the same ballpark as Matt?
Okay, let's do it.
Jonathan Gannon hasn't done anything.
Nope.
Raheem Morris hasn't done anything. Nope. John Harbaugh, I think, is on the hot seat right now. Sneakily.
That's an interesting one.
I'm not sure how much I wouldn't. I understand that there's going to be.
I could at least listen to an argument. If somebody wanted to make an argument that John Harbaugh is a top 10 coach, I would at least listen to the argument. At least that's one that I can all right, we can discuss.
McDermott, I think you'll get
Was he on the list?
no.
Okay.
But I'm just going through just alphabetically, basically at this point.
Yep.
McDermott, I think you'll get split opinions there. I will say no. I think he's good at constructing a defense. I think Matt's better at constructing an offense. If we're gonna do Matt hasn't won a Super Bowl, like Sean McDermott's had Josh Allen just playing nuclear and hasn't won a damn thing.
There.
So
Yeah.
I'm not too worried about that. Dave Canales hasn't done anything.
Nope.
Ben Johnson, first year head coach. I'm not gonna give him that credit yet. Zach Taylor can't even construct an offense where the run game and the passing game, work hand in hand at this point. I'm not gonna go with him. Stefanski, I think like the things he does well, Matt just does better. Brian Schottenheimer, not going there. Peyton.
Again, if you want to have the conversation, happy to.
Peyton, like the proof of concept year one. I get it. And he has the stuff in the past. So what we're at Sean Payton and
maybe John Harbaugh.
Yeah, maybe John Harbaugh, maybe McDermott at this point. Dan Campbell willing to have the conversation. It'd be huge for Campbell about what those new coordinators look like, right? Because I think
and you get some playoff wins. I mean, it's great that they're winning a lot in the regular season, but from a playoff standpoint, like just hasn't done anything.
Right. D'Amico, not doing it for me. Hired a terrible offensive coordinator last time. Already had to fire him. Shane Steichen, no. Lean Cohen, first year guy. Andy Reid, I'll concede Andy.
Yep.
I'll concede Andy.
Yep.
Pete Carroll, I think the game's passed him by a little bit at this point.
I would much rather have Matt at this point.
Yep. Jim Harbaugh.
That's
I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to listen. So he's on the list. Yeah. Sean McVay. Yeah. Sure. Why not? Mike McDaniel. No. Kevin O'Connell.
I'm willing to listen.
Is similar. Yeah, he's similar. Vrabel, I think, is the. But I cannot believe he did this for 2 years of Vrabel and forgot what it looked like by the end of Tennessee. I don't think he's that impressive. The 2020 stuff was crazy because he ended up getting the coach of the year over Matt, right? Just off of the volume of players that they had to play, which like maybe the weirdest criteria a coach of the year has ever won by.
Right.
Kellen Moore, first year guy. Brian Daboll, no thank you. Aaron Glenn, first year guy. Sirianni, we've already talked about him. Tomlin, we've talked about him. Kyle Shanahan, wouldn't have him be on the list in the conversation. Mike McDonald hasn't done anything in the first year to me.
Yet. Yep.
Yeah. Todd Bowles, I don't think so, unless you're giving him a lot of credit for the offensive coordinators that he's hired over the years. Okay. Brian Callahan, I mean, he coached 1 year and he went 3-14, and then Dan Quinn, like, Doug, I've seen Dan Quinn teams. You're not going to trick me with that. So, like, I guess if we're going off of that, right, reverse order again, I'd have Kyle, Kevin O'Connell, Sean McVay, Jim Harbaugh, Andy Reid,
Dan Campbell,
Sean Payton,
John Harbaugh,
and I guess maybe McDermott, right? So that's 9 guys that I'm stretching to be like they're in at least the ballpark. So I guess that means, to me, we've nailed it. To me, LaFleur is a top 10 head coach because there's only 9 guys that I would even consider having the conversation about.
I'm right there with you. To me, it's closer to 5 or 6 than it is to, 10 or 11, 12, anywhere in that range. But Again, the easiest, if you want to even keep the list the same and just take Stefanski off and put LaFleur on, I'd be totally, again, I could at least listen to that logic or whatever. But yeah, I'm there with you again. John Harbaugh, Sean Payton, Dan Campbell, Andy Reid, Jim Harbaugh, Sean McVay, Kevin O'Connell. I'll even maybe put Mike Tomlin, Kyle Shanahan in that conversation. I would probably put Tomlin in over McDermott if it were me. But outside of that, to me, again, it's a pretty easy top 10 conversation for Matt LaFleur.
Yep. We got a good head coach. I'm not worried about that. Definitely way more worried about the team consistently paying the rest of the coaching staff and positional coaches and stuff like that.
If I told you in the next 2 years that either Brian Gutekunst or Matt LaFleur got fired, which one do you think would have gotten fired? I guess it's really hard for Goody to get fired and Matt not to get fired. That's a difficult situation.
Well, again, I just fundamentally think the Packers front office and the way that it's constructed, like if Goot gets fired, they'll replace him with another internal hire, right? Or internal promotion. Like this is the Roman Empire. That is what we're aiming for here. When we fail, it will crash and burn. I don't think that we're going to see an outside general manager, fresh blood from that perspective in a very long time.
I wonder who would be the next up in that situation. That'd be an interesting conversation. But
Milt or Russ Ball? I mean, Russ Ball was interviewed last time, right? So
yeah, I guess John Eric Sullivan maybe would be the other one, maybe in that conversation as well. That'd be an interesting one. All right, you wrote up and talked a little bit about this NFL collusion case. I'm happy you did, because I'm going to be totally honest. I'm not sure that I care about it. Number one, should I care about it? And number two, what did you learn from this entire situation?
Should you care about it? I think is a little. I just don't know where it's going to end up going, so I don't know like what the impact is going to be for the fans. With that being said, I don't think that this is going to go away at any point soon. The NFL's already reacted to it in a couple of ways, even though its league sponsors aren't talking about it. Like ESPN won't touch the story, but the NFL has already changed the way it's acted in a couple of ways. The way the too long didn't watch for the 63-minute long video that Pablo Torre and Mike Florio did is basically coming off of the heels of the fully guaranteed Deshaun Watson contract.
Yep, I did see that.
The NFLPA tried to get players to continuously push for fully guaranteed money, particularly star quarterbacks, because they're the players who are most likely to get it, have the most leverage, all that stuff. Eventually, the NFLPA filed a grievance, which was like they went through like the bylaws of like the CBA to go to an arbiter who's supposed to be like this independent third party to look into cases like this between the NFL and the NFLPA, right? The basis of this was that there was collusion by NFL owners to not give fully guaranteed contracts to three quarterbacks: Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson, and Kyler Murray, who are all players who signed multi-year extensions coming off of Watson and were unable to get this fully guaranteed money. It ended up going to discovery, which, if you're familiar with lawsuits in any sort of fashion or legal cases, people hate discovery. It basically just means people get to go through your texts and emails. People don't like that because they're doing a lot of stuff and they don't want you to know about all that stuff. One of the things that were revealed during discovery was the NFL Management Council, which is this like what they say kind of goes, right? When the NFL Management Council suggests something to NFL ownership, it is basically the NFL saying, this is how we're going to do business from now on, right? The NFL Management Council told owners to fight back against guaranteed money And another thing that was found was there was an exchange between Dean Spanos, who's the owner of the Chargers, and Michael Bidwell, who's the owner of the Cardinals, after the Kyler Murray contract got signed, where Spanos congratulated Bidwell, and then Spanos said, quote, "I think many teams will be happy with it once they have the chance to review. Cleveland really screwed things up, but I was resolved to keep the guaranteed relatively low." These are people who theoretically, the NFL is not one business, right? In the
Yep.
eye of the law. The NFL is the entire market for an industry in the United States, and they don't have antitrust exemptions. The actual companies are 32 NFL teams. These teams are not supposed to be working together. I know we're used to seeing the NFL as like this thing that works together because of collectively bargained television contracts, the fact that they're like a unified force against the NFLPA and like labor issues and stuff like
Yep.
that. They're supposed to be fighting each other tooth and nail. That's the only reason that they get to exist legally, right?
Yep.
The problem isn't that NFL teams would operate outside of the legal framework of the United States. It's that the league does, right? You shouldn't be able to all work together. And that was evidence that the NFLPA had information on hand that NFL ownership was colluding to keep guarantees down. They're working together to keep guarantees down. They're not supposed to be allowed to do that.
Right.
Now, here's the other thing. Why didn't the NFLPA blast this everywhere?
That's a really good
It's an
question.
interesting thing.
Do you have
Because they
an
had
answer?
they literally had an independent arbiter come out and say, there's evidence of collusion against the players that you represent. Why did this come out in a YouTube video 3 years after the fact? Because J.C. Tretter, former Green Bay Packers offensive lineman, Cornell educated, in discovery, it was found that he called Russell Wilson, a player that he's supposed to represent, a quote, wuss. And J.C. Tretter did not want to come out, or did not want it to come out, that he was talking bad about the players that he's supposed to be representing. So because of that, both sides have basically buried this document. I don't know how Tretter has a job today.
Yeah, that's
Dude.
remarkable.
That's insane. Since then, there has been news that's come out that said some players, whether they're a part of this trio of quarterbacks or not, have been looking into their legal options to sue either the NFL or the NFLPA, which I think is responsible at this point.
Sure.
I can't believe that. Like, I don't think the NFLPA has even put out a statement, Doug. This is crazy.
And so
The
like
NFL
the NFLPA should have won this, but it feels like, right? Like, and they kind of blew it.
The independent arbiter, there's literally a statement at the end. The independent arbiter is like, yes, there's collusion happening here.
Yeah.
Insane.
Wild.
And then the other thing too, and this just came out I think today. I think Florio had it. The NFL used to circulate this document that was kind of it was for people who needed to know. It was kind of on a need to know basis, but it was basically like, here's what like the average equipment manager is making in the NFL. Here's what the average offensive line coach is making in the NFL and stuff like that, and would distribute it among NFL coaches and stuff. That document does not exist for this year. The NFL has said, we're done with that. That is clearly illegal. We're not supposed to be doing that. We're not going to do that anymore. It's it's crazy that that's happening when like you can't find good information about NFL coaching salaries right now.
No,
Like
there's no slow
there
track. There's no over the cap. There's no anything like that for coaching salaries.
so this is a conversation I had with someone earlier today. I know for a fact there was at least one former NFL head coach who like had to, how should I put it? Like go through back channels and try to figure out like how much you pay an offensive line coach. Because even to an NFL head coach, that's not like easily available information.
Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, the NFL was doing some illegal stuff. What the legal ramifications of this is going to be, I have no idea. I just don't think that this is going to go away. So, whether you care about it or not, especially during a weird dead part of the season, you're probably going to hear a lot about it, at least until another big story drops, and we'll see how people's attention diverts and stuff like that, right? Like the NFL does some funky stuff, man. Like, so like Deflategate, a lot of people think Deflategate was to like cover up the Ray Rice stuff, right? Like that's a
Okay.
real thing. That was like that's an NFL strategy, right? Where it's like, oh, let's overblow this thing out of proportion, suck all the air out of the media space, so that people don't
Interesting.
look at that other thing, right? There's been times like like when all the Gruden stuff came out, right? The
Yep.
Gruden stuff came out like the day before the NFLPA had to vote on whether DeMaurice Smith was going to continue to lead their union. And DeMaurice Smith did not have a high approval rating by the NFLPA at that point, right? And a lot of people looked at that as like the NFL like actively influencing who NFLPA leadership would be when they're supposed to, be hands off from that
Sure.
standpoint, right? So the NFL, again, ESPN isn't touching this story, right? Anything like that.
I'm sure NFL Network's not touching it.
Oh, no chance, dude.
I
No
know.
chance.
I know. I'm messing
Not
around with
until
it.
not until there's a body, right? Like
Yes.
until someone's bleeding, like they're not going to touch this thing. It's going to be really interesting to see how long this lives, how the NFL fights it from a media perspective, and how committed people are to kind of finding the truth. I do think that like, and this isn't inside information, but if you're a player, you have to be looking at this with uh interest, right? I mean, even the fact JC Treader, like, not that JC Treader hasn't resigned, but the fact that JC Treader even has a job in the union still is really interesting. JC Treader retired from the NFL in 2002, right? So his tenure as NFLPA president expired. He ushered in a new executive director, Lloyd Howell. The vote, I don't know if you guys remember about that vote, the NFLPA vote. It was very like secretive, confidential in terms of the search leading up to who was going to be the candidate for NFLPA executive director. Players basically learned who Lloyd Howell was the day that they wanted to certify him as the lead person for the union. They were like, we have no idea who this guy is, and union leadership was basically like, hey, trust us, we got you, just vote yes on this guy. There are 128 player reps in the NFLPA at the time of that vote.
Sure.
Only 48 of them actually even showed up for the vote. So you're talking about a third of the player reps. There was a full team that didn't have a single rep there, even for the vote.
That's crazy.
And then Howell created a new job within the NFLPA and gave it to JC Treader. So Treader runs the secretive search, basically gets to anoint Hal. Hal creates a new job and gives Treader that job. And then Treader suppresses the findings of collusion for 3 years. And we learn about it through an hour-long YouTube video because he called Russell Wilson a wuss.
Yeah, that's the whole thing's remarkable because like that's like the least scandalous thing to ever come out from anything. Like it would have been a nothing burger. I mean, I get it would have, I'm sure, hurt him from his position or whatever a little bit, but like it's certainly not a story and it ends up coming out anyways. The really funny part.
Yeah, the cover-up's always worse, dog.
Oh, for sure.
You gotta learn one thing about the United States of America. Like we'll give you a second opportunity, right? But what we will, rally around
Annihilate
the scandal.
You for.
It's the cover-up. The cover-up, we will rally around the scandal.
Yeah, that's a remark. Yeah, I'm definitely much more intrigued now. So well done. Thank you for that, because I do think it's very interesting. And just to see what, if any, fallout from this. I think the reason why, obviously I followed some of the easy breadcrumbs with the Deshaun Watson stuff and the collusion and things like that, like on the forefront. But I think it's just like the part of football that I don't enjoy is like the back end stuff like that. I just want to, go watch tape and stuff like that. But it definitely, these things do very much have ramifications. The Browns did screw it up in the first place, like in giving Deshaun Watson a guaranteed deal. It was remarkably stupid for a variety of reasons, but just doing it in general was like, you could see just in general how the rest of the NFL would be like, yeah, we're not following suit and that we're not setting any precedent by the Browns doing something idiotic, but obviously all colluding about it. That's a totally different story.
Yeah. And people make dumb decisions all the time and the market just moves on, right? Like,
resets it. Yeah.
I mean, how long did we deal with the fallout of like when Nuke Hopkins got that extension and he got the funny money years tagged on to the end? How much that blew up? Yeah, I mean, how much it blew up the wide receiver market immediately. And it's one of the reasons, like, we're still dealing with it today. It's one of the reasons why there's basically no movement of star players in the NFL at this point, right? At least young star players. But if there are trades that end up leading to extensions down the line, a lot of times those end up involving wide receivers because of how much the wide receiver market has exploded. I think we're going to look at it, the offensive line market between I mean, we've contributed to it with the signing of Aaron Banks, but we talked about Dan Moore last episode and stuff like that. The market's going to get jacked up from that perspective for the offensive linemen, just because
it's kind of hurting the Elgton Jenkins situation.
Right. But NFL ownership is not going to put their foot down and say like, those ones don't count. Right. In the same way that they looked at the Deshaun Watson contract and were like, that one doesn't count. So it does stick out like a sore thumb when it's like, why was this guy able to get that guaranteed money 3 years ago and no one since then has reacted to it in any sort of way, form, or fashion? So I think ultimately this probably ends up in court, or like you get some sort of like settlement or something like that. I don't think it's going to like fundamentally restructure the league. I do think one of the more important things about this though is like, Doc, how much do the players buy into the NFLPA at this point when you've had this stuff happen? Do I want to go into this tangent? So like, the sports leagues are walking antitrust violations, right? They should not exist in the United States the way that they operate legally. They're all supposed to be competing against each other. That's how capitalism, the United States, all that stuff works, right? We shouldn't have 32 teams that are supposed to be independent, working together hand in hand to operate an entire market. One of the ways that they get around this, and constant lawsuits, right? Like you're seeing it with college football, for example, right? The college football tries to make rules, someone sues, and the court immediately goes, yeah, dude, you're an illegal operation. What are you talking about? Of course you can't make rules, right? one of the ways that the NFL gets around this, and it's why I think West Virginia's athletic director this past week has come out and said, like, hey, man, we'd really like to, there's some appetite for treating these guys, these players like employees so that we just don't have the legal issues that we're dealing with right now and we can collectively bargain. Sports leagues literally need the existence of a players union so that they can say we collectively bargain this so it doesn't open them up to issues in the court.
Yep.
If you remember back in 2011 when the players had that holdout during the offseason, right? They didn't end up missing games, but they had the lockout, right? One of their big plays is to decertify the union and then take it to court and basically say, like, hey, we're done with the collective bargaining thing. Let's just settle this in a courtroom. And that's when players are going to get wins. So I do wonder if, like, the appetite for moving off of a weak players union, because it's hard to not look at college football and say, like, dude, we can beat them in court. Like, every single, like, I'm sure if they decertified the union and then went to the courts and were like, yeah, the NFL can't have a salary cap, they'd probably win that.
Yep.
Now, do they have the appetite to actually do that? Yeah. Now, would they actually have the appetite to do that? Would they be willing to sit out a year in a league where guys are, the turnover is through the roof, right? A lot of guys can't afford to not play for a season, right? Do they have that form of solidarity? That part, I don't know. Frankly, I don't think the players take the players union probably seriously enough. But yeah, it'll be an interesting story. Again, it's hard to know where it's going to end up. I think it'll probably just be a couple slaps on the hand and probably some settlements paid out, but we'll see. How
many years do we have to go before the CBA is over and we have to deal with all this stuff again?
I think it's 2030. Yeah, so it's 2030 because it was a 10-year contract that they signed in 2020, and they rushed the last CBA because it was during COVID. Everyone was spooked, all that stuff, right? The NFL in 2029 can start negotiating television contracts. So the television contracts will come out a year ahead of the next CBA because the NFL has a league option for 2030, and by all accounts, they might as well have opted out of that right now. They cannot wait to go to streaming services. I think that's going to be their big push. They want to get on big bags from streaming services instead of network television.
The decertifying of the NFLPA would, no salary cap, no draft, no, you could go in so many different angles with that of how things would change if that ended up being the case.
The Packers Super Bowl that they won with McCarthy wasn't an uncapped year. They don't win that if it's a cap season, right? And there were teams that salary dumped also. So so it was Washington, it was Dallas, and I think Oakland at the time basically ate all their dead money during a uncapped season so that it wouldn't. They basically were like, let's clear the books since this doesn't count. I think Dallas and Washington ended up getting fined a draft pick, which if the union probably wanted to take that to court and say, like, that was illegal. They're colluding. They're price fixing. Right, they're price fixing when they haven't negotiated a salary cap with us. They probably could have won something in court. So, yeah,
crazy. I didn't realize that was an uncapped year. That was something that somehow avoided me. I did not realize that.
Ted's talked about it before. Ted said on record, he was like, if that was a salary cap season because of all the injuries that they had, right? So, he was like, we wouldn't have won. We wouldn't have been able to sign Howard Green. We wouldn't have been able to do those type of things. So
interesting. Yeah, I don't know how that avoided me for so long, but that's definitely one that avoided me. We mentioned Elgton Jenkins a little bit earlier as we kind of transition back to just the Packer side of things a little bit. I know I was interested. I talked to Aaron Nagler the other day, as again recording some of these in advance, and it took me by surprise. He said he wouldn't be stunned if this didn't go anywhere with Elgton I don't want to put words in his mouth. This was like a week ago when I talked to him now, but basically something to the extent of like he could potentially see Elgton getting traded. I've had a couple people that have brought this up or have gone in that direction. I can't get there. I can't see a world in which Elton's not a Packer this upcoming season. Feels like he's a very important piece along this offensive line. A, do you think there's any way it could get there? B, if not, like how bad would this have to get before something gets to a point where, this escalates in some way, shape, or form? Because it does feel like Elgton has a very important. I don't want to move Sean Ryan to center. I don't want Jacob Monk starting at center. It does feel like this is Elton's spot, and they don't have a lot of other great options for that spot at the moment.
He's showing up to practice. He's right there with the group. It's not like he's like on the bike while everyone's doing individual drills and stuff like that, right? Teams are kind of already set at the positions that they need. They at least feel semi good about it. So if you're selling Elgton Jenkins right now, it's not at a super high cost. Unless you hold on to him until like the trade deadline or some sort of injuries start popping out, right? Something like that. So I think look at the Jair situation, right, where he ends up barely getting more salary than like Eric Stokes. Right? Yeah. The money is spent. Teams are pretty set at the positions. They've gone through free agency, the draft, trade markets, all that stuff. I don't know how much there is like an appetite for a starting guard, tackle, center, whatever he'd play for this hypothetical new team. I don't think it's going to go. When you said it was not going to go anywhere, I was inclined to agree with you because I don't think he's going to get a new deal. I don't think the team is going to pay him. And look, some of this is speculation, right? I'll put that forward. I don't know if Elton's holding out if Aaron Banks didn't get $19 million a year, right? And if his goal is like, hey, I would just like more guaranteed money and give me a $19 million a year salary so that I'm at least on par with Banks, I don't think the Packers are going to give that out right now.
I don't think so either.
In part because of his age, in part because he still has 2 years under contract, right? And they have all this flexibility on, hey man, you're playing for your deal, right? You're playing for, are you even going to be around in 2026? So I think ultimately he's just going to end up playing one more season and they're going to dump him. And I'm sure that's why Elgton is like, I would like a new contract, but I don't think I would like a new contract is enough leverage to actually force the Packers' hand. Like you're not willing to get fines for camp, right?
Right. I wouldn't think so. Not for long, at least.
So you're not going to get fines for missing the regular season. See you in week 1.
Seem like added like a couple million incentives for like Pro Bowl or Super Bowl or something like that. Just throw him a little bone. If he makes a Pro Bowl and he plays awesome, well, who cares? Throw him a couple million for that or $1 million for that. If you win a Super Bowl, throw him another $1 million for that. Just throw some incentives in there. Maybe make him a little bit happier. Move on. Get him in there for camp and have him start working. I don't know. To me, that's like hopefully an easy out. Somehow you can make it work a little bit more that way. But yeah, I want him there. I think he's going to be a really good center for this team. And I don't know. I just have no patience. I just want this resolved so that he can be there in camp and working with Jordan at center.
I just don't think it's going to get resolved. I mean, maybe he comes into training camp and he's like, all right, go time, right? It's time to get to work. But I just can't see a way where he's going to end up getting that contract extension, get more committed money moving forward. Like, this is why the Packers signed these 4-year contracts, right? So the Packers are in a perfect position as far as the Packers see it, right?
Oh, for sure.
So why would they change that up?
Yeah. Yes. They're in a vacuum. They're in heaven with that contract. It's just the player's not so happy because again, you have the whole Jair situation with Elton next year where you can get off of it for nothing. And the Packers have all the leverage in that situation. I'm sure Elton doesn't want to again find himself in that same spot. I got a fun one for you before we get out of here. There's these names that float around every once in a while of like, could Green Bay trade said player? I think these always get a little bit overblown because we just don't see very many trades in the NFL. But I just want to pick your brain on if you feel like there could be any scenario between now and the trade deadline in which the Packers could trade any of these players. So we'll start with Elgton Jenkins. Is there any world in which the Packers could trade Elgton Jenkins?
They would have to really like whoever that next starting center is, right?
Like Jacob Monk or something like that.
At this point, I would think Jacob Monk, because Sean Ryan is taking all those reps at right guard right now, right? So they would have to really like both what Sean Ryan and Jacob Monk have been showing this summer. And maybe that'll change up a little bit when training camp starts and things like that, when, you know, actual pads go on and they have joint practices and they get more looks at like real contact football instead of conditioning. Right. That's the only scenario that I could see it where, you know, some team is willing to part with like a 4th round pick or something like that. And they're like, well, we kind of like our guys. Sure, let's take another swing. Let's get another rookie contract.
Okay. Malik Willis.
I don't think so, because
I don't think so either.
I think you just write it out. I think you just write it out. The other thing too, like, I don't know
who's going to do it.
Yeah, like if you're trading Malik Willis, you're trading him for like a 6th or 7th, right? And you already have a guy who's been in the system. Like, just write it out. Just write the thing out.
He has so much more value to you. Yeah.
Yeah, there's not enough juice to squeeze. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
On the Malik Willis trade. So
Rasheed Walker.
Okay.
I'll throw one out there first. What do you think about this? I'll throw one out there. The only way for me I could see it is Jordan Morgan wins left tackle, and Rasheed says, "You're trading me because I'm about to get $20 million on the open market if I start. Like, I'm not going to sit here and be a swing tackle. Like, if we're rotating or something, if you want me to prove it that I'm the better guy, fine, I'll do that. But if you're literally benching me and Jordan's the starting left and Zach Tom's the starting right, and I'm just backing up here, and there's a team that's willing to trade for me to make me a starter, you got to trade me because this is literally going to cost me like $10 million a year."
Yeah, that's really interesting. Because they'll probably be able to get a comp 4th if he hits the open market and he's making $20 million a year next year. So I wonder if Morgan wins the starting job and you're comfortable with Anthony Belton being your swing tackle in 2025, which, like, he was a 2nd round pick, right? It's totally possible. If you just get in front of it and you're like, yo, like, if we bench you, you're not going to get the $20 million a year. So what if we just trade you right now and get the 4th? And yeah, so maybe. But again, I mean, what was it? Slick Rick or whatever? Pretty Ricky. I can't remember which Ricky it is.
Ricky
tweeted out Rasheed Walker is going to get a contract soon. So we'll see what happens.
We'll see. Sean Ryan.
Not until they start moving Morgan or Belton to right guard consistently.
Yeah.
Right? Someone's got to play right guard on this team.
True story.
So I'm less inclined to think Ryan is going to move. I think Ryan probably won't get a contract extension, but I think they'll use him as a 1-year stopgap starter.
I think so too. Romeo Doubs.
I could see it for sure.
Okay. Trade deadline.
I don't know I don't know what the trade market looks like for him because he's expiring contract, injury history. I could see team. What was that?
Like a 5th?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
4th seems
I would look at
aggressive.
Like what the comp would be for like the Khalil Shakur, like if he would have hit free agency, what he would have gotten for the Bills draft pick wise for a comp pick.
It's got to be a 5th right around there, I would think.
It's like 5th or 6th. I mean that's the right range. That's the right range for sure. Yeah.
Okay. The
big thing is just like the injury question, right? Where it's like how much do you count that?
Yeah, I mean it's got to be something. Wicks.
By the way, Andy, I want to bring this up. So the Packers are getting a new helmet this year, right?
Okay.
The airbrushed leather helmet thing that they talked about with like the 1950s uniform.
Got it.
How's that going to work with a guarding cap? Someone's going
know.
to airbrush a Guardian cap. That's going to be funny to look at. Yeah.
They're already funny to look at, though. And it'd be great if it was just like the normal one. They just put the normal one. One guy's out there with a green helmet on, whatever gold helmet on. You get my point. But all right, Dontavian Wicks next.
I don't want to.
I don't think
he's got 2 years left.
No. He's got 2 years left, and he's also their best blocking receiver with Christian Watson out too. I don't think you can get rid of him at this point. But
yeah, no, don't do it. I still believe.
I'm never selling the stock. Like I said, it could be 2035 and he's playing in the UFL and he's like, he has one catch for like 40 yards in a game. I'd be like, bring him back. He's breaking out. Kingsley Enagbare.
I could see that for sure. I mean, that might be one that happens near cut day, honestly.
Yep. 7th round or something like that.
Yeah. Just like, like Malik Willis type of trade, right? Like exactly that, where it's like, hey, my team is picking in the 20s in the waiver wire. We want a pass rusher. We would like Kingsley Enagbare, but someone's going to put a waiver claim in for him after cut downs. I'll just give you a 7th round pick. So you give him to me. I can 100% see that happening, especially with, I don't want to say logjam at defensive end.
You got a lot of players.
There's a lot of players who are in contention for that roster spot, and Enagbare he's making the player performance
$3 million. Yep.
Yeah,
you saved $3 million.
Yeah, so he's getting that bump in salary, but he's still only under contract for 1 year, right?
Yep.
So there are, if you look at long-term roster construction wise, there are probably better ways to build your roster than keeping Enagbare. So yeah, I could totally see that happening.
Yeah, it's actually something I've predicted as well. I think there's a really good chance of it happening. I think you have your 4 guys in LVN, Gary, Colin Oliver, and Baron Sorrell. And then I think Brenton Cox can just beat him out because he's cheaper, he's younger, he has a year left of restricted free agency if you need to use it. And then even like, to me, if Mosby is your 6th on your practice squad, you get him back in the practice squad and you can call him back as your 6th. To me, there's not a huge difference there between
Mosby and Mosby plays a lot of special teams too.
Yep. Big time. So I think you could easily make that work. I got 2 more for you. Quay Walker.
No, I think Quay's going to get an extension, man.
I do too. But if all of a sudden deal breaks down, you can't figure out a contract for him, would you remotely consider it in that situation? You're just far apart. Like you're $5 million a year apart. It's not even remotely close. You want to pay him 14 mil. He wants 19 mil, something crazy. It's just way out there. And your boy Tyron.
I mean, but if he's demanding that, what is someone willing to give back in a trade?
True.
Because that is a former 1st round pick, right?
Yeah.
Also, yeah. Well, you said 14 mil, but then why don't you give him the 5th year? The 5th year option decision on Quay Walker. I don't think is as cut and dry as people made it seem. Because I think a lot of people were like, well, yeah, he's a linebacker, so you don't give out the 5th year option because that also counts through 4 outside linebackers. But like the money is, I don't want to say so low. But the variance between position to position for the 5th year option is not as high as you think. The franchise tag is where it becomes way bigger. So if you for sure wanted to keep Walker around, you should have given him the option. So that's still a weird one to me.
Last but not least, I don't know. They would never do it, I don't think. But there's this name's been thrown out there for some weird reason. Javon Bullard.
I mean, so if you trade Bullard, I think it hurts you more at nickel than it does at safety at this point. I think the team has a lot of safety depth, and I think whether this holds true in 2025 or not, in 2024, I do think Zane Anderson and Kitano Oladapo played better at Bullard at true safety.
Okay. I like how both of those guys played, so I don't have a huge argument with that. Although I do think Bullard played a little bit better than he gets credit for, but I could buy both of those arguments at least.
So I think the big question is, are you okay with your depth at the slot position? And we've talked about the cornerback depth, where it's like we got 3, and then after that, it's a big question mark on who's going to end up coming in at the end. I don't think you do it because of the cornerback depth question. Because I don't think that there's a nickel you want to bring off of the bench. I think ultimately they don't want to play Keyshawn in the nickel. They want to play him outside. And then Hobbs is going to bounce around from the nickel and outside anyway. But like Bullard at least gives you – Bullard's going to be really – I don't think Bullard is going to win a starting job. I'll put that on Front Street. If he does, he does. But like as of right now, I don't think he's going to win the nickel. I think that's going to end up going to Hobbs. I don't think he's going to win safety. I think that's going to go to Evan Williams.
Yep.
But Bullard gives you so much flexibility. If there's any injury, literally at any position in the secondary, where he can just come in and help out because we have so many our top cornerbacks outside of Carrington Valentine are guys who can play inside or outside. So, Evan Williams drops out, Bullard can sub in.
Yep.
Hobbs drops out, Bullard can sub into the slot. If Keyshawn gets hurt, Hobbs can kick out from the slot to outside, and then Bullard can come into the slot. Plus the fact he's a second-round pick. Teams usually don't move on from those after a year. Nope. They like the guy. And
you're selling low.
3 years.
What are you going to get? A fourth, fifth round pick in that
situation? Yeah.
You're selling low.
Yeah. And then also, he's still under a 3-year contract, right? So,
cheap
there's value there.
Totally
I think Bullard is the least likely of all of them.
I totally agree.
I think he's just like your super sub. He's just like the most important backup you have on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I like him. I actually think he's going to have a really good second season. I think he's better than he gets credit for, even though it wasn't a great season. I will absolutely admit that, but I still think there's a lot there. I think you try to cultivate that rather than just give up on it at this point in time. At least that's where I'm at. Justis, I cannot thank you enough as always. AcmePackingCompany.com, social media, JUMOSQ. Anything else you want to plug on the way out?
That's it. Yeah, just keep an eye out on the NFLPA thing because, again, I don't think it's going to die anytime soon.
Mike Florio won't let it.
Florio's been on one. For sure. Which, honestly, good credit for him. As much crap as people give Florio for going on his diatribes sometimes, he's actually sticking it to the league in a way that, like, I don't know if Sports Illustrated is covering it this way. I don't know if ESPN. I know ESPN's not covering it this way. The other partners, I doubt, CBS, Fox, all that stuff are covering this story. So at least someone's willing to stick it to the man and be like, get the information out and stay persistent on it. So
he's got to be the most unique person like covering the NFL. It's such a weird dynamic of Mike, the idea of Mike Florio. I don't know. He's an interesting one. I'll let you get out of here. Thank you so much as always. We'll talk again a couple weeks here. Find him again, social media at JUMOSQ and at AcmePackingCompany.com. You can find me at Andy Herman NFL. That's going to do it for us today. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.